9th regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the commission. State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting tonight include representatives of the city's planning department, city's attorney's office, and the city planning consultant Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission at the appropriate time, please come forward to the lectern. When recognized, and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the planning commission and not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to the silent mode or turn it off. And at this time, I'll ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnecki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Here.
Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the agenda or make an amendment? Mr. Krent makes a motion, and Mr. Tagle seconds it. Any discussion on approving the agenda? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And next is approval of the minutes from the April 11th meeting. Would somebody like to move the approval of those minutes or make amendments to the minutes? Mr. Fox moves. Ms. Malala Holly seconds. Any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Is anyone that would like to address the commission for an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing no one moving to the lectern, then we will turn it over to a public hearing for a special use approval and preliminary site plan review for SU JPLN 2023-0002, a proposed Kroger D463 fuel station, which is on the west side of John R., south of Larchwood, which is PIN 88-20-26-435-029, 88-20-26-433-019, and then 020 and 021. Section 26, currently zoned IB, Integrated Industrial and Business District. I assume Mr. Carlisle will be doing the presentation.
Yes. Thank you. Brent, this is not working. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. A little background. The site in question is at the southwest corner of Larchwood Drive and John R. Road. It's a 1.87 acre parcel. The applicant is Kroger, and they are seeking approval to develop a fuel station. A fuel station is a special use in the IB Integrated and Industrial Business District. I want to note that we received 2 letters with regards to this application. One of the letters noted that this would be a rezoning. I just want to clarify, this is not a rezoning. This is a special use only. The zoning is not changed. The current zoning is IB, and it will remain IB zoning. The site is surrounded by IB to the north, to the south, and to the west, with a mix of office, some single-family warehousing type use. To the east is R1E, single-family residences. The site plan is on the screen in front of you. What the applicant is proposing are 8 fueling stations or islands that would total 16 pumps. In the middle of that little jutting building out would be a 534 square foot store. There are 4 handicap parking spaces along the rear end of the property, and the portions to the southwest corner would remain stormwater management as well as vacant and wooded areas. One of the things that came up in our review is a notion of an alley. We call it paper street or paper alley. It's an alley that shows up on the plat, but is actually not constructed. So if you go to the site, you would have no idea that it's there. It's that portion of the site in yellow. There were, my assumption was there were alleys that continued both north and south from this alley in the past. However, those have been vacated at one other portion in time, and this is the last remaining kind of stub that exists for this particular alley. As you can see, it kind of bifurcates the site right in the middle of the site itself, and essentially it would make the parcel non-buildable to what they want to build to if this alley were to remain in its place. So what the applicant is going to request, they haven't done at this point, but what they're going to request would be a vacation of this alley. And what a vacation means was the city would then transfer the rights of right-of-way access to the private property for future development. The alley vacation is a public hearing at the Planning Commission. It can be considered as part of the site plan review, but the Planning Commission is a recommending body on the vacation of that alley. Ultimately, it's up to the City Council for their consideration. When this came to our attention about this alley, the applicant hadn't submitted an application. This public hearing had already been scheduled, and so and I'll talk in a second here about what our recommendation would be, but this would at some point have to come back to the Planning Commission for consideration as a public hearing of this alley for recommendation to the City Council. With regards to the building itself, we do note that all the IB standards have been met with regards to bulk, setback, height, et cetera. One of the questions that we did raise for Planning Commission consideration is the building that we're proposing is, again, only about 500 square feet tall. And really, should there be some discussion in the Planning Commission if a larger building should be built to better serve the surrounding area and provide more of a convenience type atmosphere than what is being proposed by the applicant? Access will remain as one point. Access will be one full drive off Larchwood and one full drive off John R. This has been shown by the engineering as well as the fire department. They raised no concern with regards to circulation and access. Again, four parking spaces are provided. We did note that there is an opportunity to put in or either put in additional parking for EV parking or perhaps convert some of the existing parking to EV parking. That's something that we do ask that the applicant consider as part of their application. Landscaping has been met. They are providing a very robust landscape for the site. We did do a review of the photometric plan and note that all the photometrics have been met with regards to property line foot candle measurement. However, we do note that underneath the canopy itself are 53.9 foot candles. That's an extremely bright foot candle measure. Just for example, the maximum for a normal parking lot light is 20 foot candles. So we're talking about 3 times the amount of light underneath the canopy itself. There are no standards for canopy lighting in our zoning ordinance, but because this is a special use, as well as there are residential across the street and next door, we do think that there should be limitations and reductions on that lighting of the canopy. We think 20 foot candles or less would be an appropriate measure for what those foot candles under the canopy should be. This is the elevations provided by the applicant. The elevation on top is the elevation if you're looking from John R. The elevation on the bottom right would be the elevation if you're looking at from Larchwood. This is a special use, so there are the special use standards that the Planning Commission is very familiar with, as well as this is a site plan, so again, there are site plan standards that the Planning Commission should consider as part of the application. So we are asking the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing and have discussion on the following items: the use of the property as a gas station, consideration of a larger convenience store, adding additional parking spaces for the EV fueling, the architecture and design of the kiosk, reduce the light intensity under the canopy, the special use standards, as well as the site plan standards. And we recommend the Planning Commission postpone approval to 1, allow the applicant to amend the application based on the discussion tonight, and 2, allow the applicant to submit an alley vacation application and for the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing on that vacation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Yes,
Just
Mr. Faison, go ahead.
two quick questions. When you say EV parking, is that with a charging station there for the EV?
I mean, our recommendation is actually put the charging station in themselves.
I'm sorry.
Our recommendation is to put the charging station in as part of the site plan construction.
No, I understood. So EV.
Yeah, so-
Charging station.
Yeah, I will tell you from my experience, I've reviewed, the last 2 gas stations I've reviewed have included both EV parking as well as gas parking. And they note that the EV technology is increasing so much that they think that'll be a competing market in the very near future with regards to, in addition to gas. So they're actually preparing themselves in advance for EV technology. So we think this is an opportunity that the applicant should do the same.
And then one quick follow-up, if I may. Could you go back to the site plan where you showed the handicap parking?
So it's not,
Yeah, I
it's
want
not
you-
clear. This is the parking here. These are 4 spaces. This is actually paved area where the underground storage tanks, the gas are going to be. So this is where the parking's actually going to be.
So my question is, that seems to be far from where I think the person would be going, right? So shouldn't it be, isn't it typically very close to the
Yeah,
entrance?
I mean, I guess, Mr. Faison, they could move it a little bit farther to the south, but this is still a drive aisle that they want full circulation. So the only way to get parking closer would be actually move the kiosk back towards the back of the site, away from the canopy. Otherwise, yes, they can move a little bit closer, but you still have the issue of this. There's a drive aisle in between where the parking area is and where the store is.
Yeah.
It's such a small store
Right.
that it's really an add-on to the use of the site as a fueling site. The store really has much of a physical presence there.
Yeah, so that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Parekas.
Well, while we're on this image and talking about this, my understanding from the way that I read the pictures in our agenda packet is that the entrance really is, that back piece is actually blocked off because that whole back section of the store is actually storage and, whatever, a utility room. So to enter, you're actually heading towards the front.
Yep.
So the handicap parking is actually quite a distance from the
Yep.
door.
Yeah, the entrance is right here. So
Right.
you got to walk away around, cross this drive aisle, cross competing potentially cars here to get into the front door of the kiosk building, essentially. My assumption, I believe the applicant, is they wanted to integrate the building with the canopy itself rather than have a physical separation between the two, and that's where it kind of landed right in the middle of the canopy right there.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Biegner.
A couple questions. I drove by it and it seemed kind of swampy. Is that why the detention pond's there?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, the detention ponds, one, it's in the best spot for site planning purposes. 2, it is the wettest part of the site. And 3, it's the requirement of the engineering department to put the detention pond in to begin with.
Will that make that parcel better for the neighbors, especially the residential?
It'll help off-site drainage. It will help capture existing stormwater that runs on the site and overflows onto other properties, yes.
Okay. And then the one resident is at top left. Is there buffer on their side where they've got a lot of trees, so they could be buffered to some degree?
Yes, there is a significant amount of buffer along that property line as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Fox.
So with the way that I'm seeing this plan versus the outline of the actual property, there's that whole little chunk of land on the southern end that's just, as it currently stands with the current application, there's no use for that portion of land at all. It's just going to be left as trees.
I mean, in theory, it could be potentially developed in the future, but right now it's going to remain a stand of untouched trees.
Okay.
Any other questions for, yes, Mr. Tagle?
Has it been confirmed there's no utilities in the alley?
Yeah, I had an informal conversation with engineering, and they're not going to oppose the vacation.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll bring up the applicant and make a presentation and answer questions I'm sure members of the commission have for you. evening.
Good evening. Through the chair, my name is Matthew Pisco, representing the Kroger Company of Michigan. With Mr. Carlisle's presentation, there's a whole not any big surprises in the presentation, but I would like to go through operation, the macro, the micro, and then the site-specific attributes that might help clarify some of the questions. Kroger has a little over 995 sites across the country, so they're a bona fide petroleum marketer. They operate with Kroger employees as grocery stores evolve to have different categories, meat markets, delis, banks, coffee. This is a natural progression to help with the convenience of the customers. This one would serve the store to the north. And we landed on fuel. So this has been a very important program for them. Obviously, we have 2 other sites in the city of Troy. Interestingly enough, you have pretty much the full arsenal of what Kroger has across their enterprise. 780 square foot on Rochester Road, less than 200 square foot at the shopping center on Northfield Commons on South Boulevard. And this is somewhere in between. So that's what we're proposing for the site. In Michigan, we have 80 sites, retail petroleum sites. So this would be the 3rd in Troy. So you see, you are an important part of our program. And we've grown through acquisition of grocers, Great Scott, Farmer Jack, and at late Hillers. Our competitors are Meijer, Walmart, VG's, and Costco. Although we're not a private club, we do offer discounts for loyalty to the grocery store. As Mr. Carlisle stated, we do comply with all the sections and requirements of Section 6.28 vehicle fueling. And I'm going to get to the very nitty-gritty and the questions that were raised. We're not a traditional convenience store operator. Most transactions occur at the pump. The job, this will equate to 4 equivalent full-time positions. So as far as a job generator, our hours, which goes to a couple of things, the night sky compliance and the lights, 0600 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. That's what we're proposing. So it's not a 24-hour operation. It's appropriate for the proximity to the adjacent property across the street and to the west. The architecture, mix it up a little bit after our initial submittals, that's really not enough. And we looked at what we did on Rochester Road, looked at what we did at South Boulevard, and thought, considering the district we're in, something a little more commercial. So it's split face on the bottom, then there's a smooth band of concrete sill, and then it'll be stone face, jumbo brick above that. So there'll be texture and movement as we go up the building. And then it'll be earth tone ACM panels, and that will be duplicated per the requirements on the canopy. So the canopy columns will reflect, although clearly a taller detail. We've got the road commission. It was a chicken or egg issue. We asked them, if we propose this and we had this property under option, would you support getting a curb cut onto John R? And they said yes, with the conditions. You create a right-hand turn lane and a decel lane that traverses the property to really mitigate any traffic issues. But I will say, with all the operational intelligence we have with the fuel stations, these aren't trip generators. People grocery shop, they secure their points, they go to the fuel station. Typically, in a perfect world, they'd all be in the parking lot, but this is line of sight from the roof, so this is close enough. This isn't something that people are laying on their couch and pop up like, hey, let's go to Kroger gas station. They're already out there. I'd like to think they're that exciting, but they're not. Lighting, as bright as it is dark sky compliant, and we go dark at 10 o'clock. Once the till's empty and the employees leave, we turn the lights down to bare bones minimum. The reason we like it so bright under the canopy is, one, people are searching for credit cards in their wallets and purses, and they're using the gas nozzle into a very small orifice on the side of their car, and we like it to be as bright as possible. Not saying we can't go lower, but that's the purpose why we have so many foot candles. Unlike other operators who will remain nameless, our operations are very quiet. We don't have televisions on our dispensers. We don't have radio. We don't have that sort of distraction. We're really kind of we're a category of the department store to our north. So there's no frills. Regarding the detention basin, would that ever be future development? No, it wouldn't be. We're only utilizing the portion of the property that the business and the rooftops would support and keep this healthy and help maintain the healthfulness of the grocery store to the north. So that property is just meaningfully used for detention to retain the mature trees that aren't scrub trees and to be a buffer to the backyards of those properties that are zoned commercial but are acting as residential. So with that, 5 minutes or less. Any questions, comments, concerns, I'll be glad to help.
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
A couple, if you don't mind. Will you have electric charging stations in this depot?
Through the chair, those typically are not in fuel stations. Of all those 994, there's 0. What we do is put them in the grocery store parking lot because it's a more lengthy process. We don't have overnight parking, we don't have spaces, and we don't want to intermingle petroleum dispensers, those 8 dispensers that are under the canopy with EV. And we have 4 parking spaces, which one is for the air tower. It's a much wider spot so people can get there. We have the accessible parking spot, and then 2 for employee shifts. So we're really at a bare bones minimum. A vast majority of our transactions occur with people parked at the dispenser. They're not going to move. So to answer your question, EVs are slated for the grocery store parking lot. That's where we have room to manage those and have contracts with providers for EV.
So your answer is no?
Yes, that should have been the quickest response.
Secondly, and this is not casting aspersions upon the city of Troy or this whole area, but every time you look at the news in the morning, sometime in the late hours of night, there's a mugging, there's a killing, a shooting, a carjacking. I'm not saying this is going to happen here, but are you going to have security cameras?
Oh my, yes. We have a very robust security system. And the other thing is we close early. At 10 p.m. is as late as we're open. So that we have no interest in the overnight hours.
Okay, the last question is, will there be any overnight parking in the fueling area?
None.
Thank you.
Absolutely prohibited.
Yes, Ms. Mulahali.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to begin from the very beginning. Why did you choose this site?
Oh, my goodness. We have a relationship with Bostic Realty that owns the site. We have been looking at this site, honest to goodness, 6 or 7 years. And because it's perfect, we can't accommodate a fuel station at the store to the north. We just don't have room. And trying to find a site that accommodates something that would be the right size for the customer base, and it's been very, very difficult. This parcel I've got probably 10 different layouts for this parcel, and finally the timing was right where Mr. Bostic said the property's available. The road commission said, hey, you know what? We can get behind that decel lane if you're willing to do that. And it just, all the pieces came together at once. It's been, oh, no, we don't have this. So the stars aligned for this one.
So you may have done the market analysis for having this fuel station in this location and, of course, the customer impact and of course, revenue generation. There are 2 other gas stations about half a mile away. What are your thoughts on that when you are looking into this fuel station coming here, proximity-wise, business-wise?
For the residents of Troy, it's always advantageous to have competition. Kroger coming into the neighborhood helps promote that price to the street. So if Kroger is pricing, other locations they don't have to match, but they are probably inclined to match. It just gives the citizens of Troy another option. And the cross-merchandising between the grocery store, you shop at a Kroger grocery store, you accumulate points that can get discounts on gasoline. We have arrangements with Shell up to 10 cents or 20 cents a gallon maximum, but we can go up to $1 a maximum. So it's of great benefit to our patrons, and they're utilized. So it's our business model says competition is good, and we actually think other stations probably get margin bumps or business bumps from these, because people come by, they see, oh, it's loaded or it's half loaded, we're going to go to the next station.
So the Rochester store location, I'm very familiar with that area. This is more the area opposite to the fuel station, if that were to be built, is all residential. I'm kind of a little concerned about that aspect. I know you mentioned the times, which was one of my questions to ask, what are the operating hours for the fuel station? I'm concerned about the lights, and you said you're going to take it off, it's going to dim at 10, all of those things, which is fine, but still the location seems to be very much like, as I was driving by today, I'm seeing 2 or 3 homes, they have their front doors that will now, if this were to be built, open to the fuel station. Right across the road, that is, right across the street. I'm a little I'm finding it hard to have a fuel or station to which my front door opens to. So any thought has gone into, again, going back to my first question, the location. I know it has been zoned IB, but I'm just looking into the vicinity area right opposite this location, which is all residential.
The residential nature, there's lots of things that have gone in to mitigate. The landscaping is quite intense in that the hedgerow that you see on the eastern side is tall enough to block lights at mature from going across the street. Then we have the deciduous canopy that comes across. So the visual of seeing the canopy is going to be in a few years, not as the trees are planted, will be of no consequence. It's a very, that's the size of the canopy fascia. It's a very transparent, it's not a large convenience store that you're looking at. You look through the canopy. We've got a street as a buffer. And as far as interruptions to Kroger nationally and how they design their systems and how modern automobiles, onboard vapor recovery, as you pump gas, the vapors from that would normally in the old days blow out the nozzle, they're recovered by your car. So all of us, when we're filling our cars, you don't smell it anymore. So there's no smell. The tanker, that's always a concern. That's a 25-minute exercise. The tanker comes in, they drop, they have the same thing. They extract vapor as they put in product. That is an absolutely odorless event, and they're gone. This is a quiet operation. I love Burger King. If it was this or a Burger King, I'd take this in a heartbeat. I've got a Speedway a quarter mile from my house that goes 24 hours. And as much as I'd like to say it causes me aggravation because it's inordinately bright, it doesn't. It's really quite it's uneventful for me. And I think the way this is designed, you know, there's going to be near opacity at some point in time where you're not even going to be able to see the station. We'll just have to deal with institutional knowledge of our customers.
Thank you.
And just a clarification, when you mentioned Mr. Bostic, he's your landlord for your existing Kroger store out farther north from the site? Or you have some kind of a business relationship there because that was originally developed by him?
Yeah, it was a property proffered by him. In all earnestness, it may be as long as 10 years ago. We started mulling around, and this has always been a phenomenal size, and it's the proximity to the grocery store. And the fact that we have this industrial commercial zoning that wraps around us before we get to the street, it seemed like it was a good site. And we believe that very much. We're spending, you know, north $2 million to get this done with your support.
Mr. Fox.
Yeah, so speaking of that residential property immediately across the street there, that's actually my neighborhood. This is the closest to home that we've had a case here since I got on the commission, which is why I want to say, like, personally, I was very, very excited by the idea of this project when I first read everything. My wife and I are Kroger fuel station users avidly. However, when I'm here, I'm not just representing my wife and I, as excited as she was when I told her about this project. I'm representing all of Troy. And the idea of just putting another gas station, like looking past the bells and whistles and the Kroger fuel, like the idea that it's just another gas station on a street that's already got multiple gas stations, I guess what I would personally like to see from this property is I would like to see it try to do something new. I would like to see a convenience store that suddenly adds walking options to that neighborhood next door. I would like to see EV charging stations that provide people with electric cars more options in the area. But just another gas station, you know what I mean? So I guess there's not really a question in there for you, but I guess that would be my feedback looking at this project. As someone who would like to see it done, I think there are some changes that would benefit the overall project as a whole and ultimately make it a better project for those living by and on John R. So.
Sure, go ahead.
Through the chair, that kiosk is mountable, unlike the kiosks on South Boulevard where transactions occur either at the dispenser or through a pass-through window. This is mountable. You can go in, there's coffee, there's coolers on the inside. So, and we do have, although it didn't show up on the rendering, we do have connection to the sidewalk, to the pedestrian path that circumnavigates the kiosk so that people can, let me see if I can direct you to the sheet. It would be C1.20, you can see the pedestrian connectivity to the John R. Road sidewalk, and then that connects to a pedestrian path around there. So as people approach, it's a defined area. So it's not a convenience store. You know, my spiel usually is we're not a traditional convenience store. We have an 80,000 square foot convenience store behind us. You know, this is 534 square feet. It's not a full-blown convenience store, but it's much larger than our traditional kiosks.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Is it Mr. Pisco?
It is.
Make sure you sign in on that little sheet
I did.
there. So,
I
okay,
signed
thank
in and
you.
put
Great.
my address.
Well, if there's, yes.
Just clarification. Hi, Matt. Nice seeing you again.
Nice seeing you too.
Matt's did the other two. He was a civil engineer for the other two projects. We've only spoken by phone and email for this project. So,
Yes.
Just a little clarification. I think you were kind of painting around a little bit, but the reason that Kroger didn't provide EV charging stations here is the thought is that by providing EV charging at the grocery store, when customers go in, they can hook up the car to charge while they shop, and they're in the store for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever. So it's charging while they're doing something?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. I usually don't want to compliment Mr. Savin and Mr. Carlisle until afterwards, regardless of the outcome. But it's always a pleasure working with them and the elder, Mr. Carlisle, as well. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Question for the
Yeah,
applicant?
go ahead.
I think you mentioned that, that the fueling station would not work in the parking lot by the store. Is that what you said?
yes.
And I was curious why, because I just, visually, that seems like a huge parking lot. And I'm thinking about, I go to the one at South Boulevard very
Yep.
frequently. So I can't discern the difference between the two, why that would have space in this one.
Every store, like our own homes have mortgages, every one of these stores has a different parking calculation that supports that business. I don't have the bandwidth to remember all the stores as it relates to that, but the parking ratio for that store, this size, even if we went with a much smaller, it would take 60 to 100 spots away for circulation, the tanker path. It's just too much. The most important thing, our primary purpose in life is we're grocers that provide convenience and attachment to the grocery store and potential discounts. It's just too harmful to the parking field in this circumstance. God knows, as we buy property, we won't build a new Kroger store without a fuel station. So our property criterion has gotten, we need property big enough to do that, to get access and to have it off in a corner. We have stations, so that's why we've expanded through acquisition is so important, because we've inherited properties that in a perfect Kroger vacuum, we wouldn't have designed that way. But
Ms. Parakis.
Just along those lines, because I was thinking the same thing. There's a property, I believe, just north of your store, just on the west side of John R., that seems vacant. Is that something that you have explored? I don't know anything about it.
we have a very aggressive real estate department that is always looking for properties. One, you have to be a willing seller. It can't be deed restricted. Kroger, unlike some petroleum marketers, have no interest in taking over soils that are impacted. They want a clean site. They operate clean. When Kroger, God forbid, they decide they want to up and leave, they'll take that gas station out and that property will be pristine. That's how they operate. So there could be a multitude of circumstances that would prevent properties that look perfect, that once you get, your phase one done, it's like, no, we're not interested in, potential remediation or impacts to other properties.
Yes, Mr. Savin, do you want to give the history on that site there?
The one that's north of the Kroger at John R. and Big Beaver?
Yes.
There was a conditional rezoning application. It's presently zoned residential, so gas stations would not be permitted on that site without rezoning. There was a conditional rezoning application to the applicant owner proposed is rezoning to a more dense classification, and there was a controversial planning commission meeting, and the project has been kind of put aside since then. But I have a follow-up question to my other question. Not to put you on the spot, Matt, but do you know there are 3 Kroger grocery stores in Troy? Do you happen to know offhand how many EV charging stations there are at each of the Krogers?
You know what, I will tell you, I'm retail petroleum. I'm not involved whatsoever. In my mind, it explodes every time somebody says EV, because I've been a petroleum guy for 25 years, understand it's coming, but that is really a whole separate entity within Kroger. They don't ask me or inform me when things are happening. But I would think it's probably an unavoidable truth at some point in time.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Fox.
That addressed a big question that I had, but I guess then with that question addressed, I will just make the statement. I would encourage us all to consider that at some point in time is probably coming a lot sooner than we think, just in terms of electric and the conversion over to electric vehicles. I know GM has set some very aggressive goals, likely the rest of the big 3 are to follow, et cetera, et cetera.
Through the chair, if I can, Mr. Fox raised an earlier point, and I didn't address it, and I'm getting old, and it just popped out of my head. But one thing, why do we need another gas station? And I will say the exemplary management and operation of a Kroger fuel station versus others, not naming names, that aren't company operated, that aren't owned by a publicly traded company, that might not be as fastidious when it comes to regulatory compliance. They might not inspect on a timely basis. They might not maintain their stormwater management facilities. We bring a powerhouse and a juggernaut of goodness in Kroger. I've worked with them for 20 years. They do the right thing, and they operate very well. That's one advantage. Dealers, and you'll notice that gas stations change brands all the time. And that's where we lend a steadiness to the market. So I think, I love Kroger. If it isn't obvious, I'll say it out loud. They bring goodness to the retail petroleum market, that's to your earlier question.
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
As sort of a follow-up, I was thinking that when you were asked about EV, and you indicated that it would not be in this facility, but most likely in the parking lot adjacent to it before Kroger's. Maybe you can't answer it, but if we don't make a decision tonight and we adjourn it, maybe you can think about it. How much space would EV take in the parking lot at the Kroger store? And what would that translate into a number of charging stations? And along with it, I know it keeps evolving, but right now, if you take a low voltage EV, your car is going to be parked there for probably half a day or more. Could you maybe touch on those next time you're back?
I will do my level best to get the far brighter people than me within Kroger. So.
Yes, Mr. Krantz.
Just to help Mr. Hudson out, I was reading in Crane's magazine, the newer charging stations are about 18 minutes for 80% charge. And I can see why, if you're going to go into a supermarket to buy things, usually by the time you go in, come out, pay for your stuff, and get back to your vehicle, it could be 20 minutes. So it makes more sense at a supermarket than at a standalone. Like we had the, was it Red Wagon that we had? Okay, they incorporated both. Well, they incorporated only fueling stations now, but they put the conduits underneath the concrete for future EV charging. But that makes sense because, again, you're going into a store, you're buying something, it takes, transaction time, come back out. I could see 18, 20 minutes. That makes sense.
So let's hope those chargers are available and they're used and installed.
Well, yeah, but if you don't, fortunately, people kind of gravitate toward the quick charge places and the ones that are really sluggish. We're not going there.
I agree.
It's human nature.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I understand.
Making a requirement.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
Maybe this would be a question for Mr. Carlisle. Mr. Carlisle, during your presentation, you referenced several gas station applications that you had seen that incorporated the EV with the traditional gas station style. Was there anything particular about those sites that made them more advantageous to having EV charging stations versus other gas station sites?
The two that I reviewed were context. They were right off the expressway, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. The other thing is they had a much larger convenience component with more groceries as part of it too. Those are the two main differences between that and what we have here.
Okay.
If I may,
But I will. Can I just one more thing? Part of their selling point was they weren't just doing EV for now. They think for the future, they think it's going to be an equal market to the gas side of things. And so they're preparing themselves for future when that does switch happen. So it was both a short-term loss now, they think, but a long-term gain when the EV technology improves and it becomes a necessity to have more EV charging stations.
if I recall, though, we approved
Any more questions for Mr. Pisco? I had one quick question. So the size of this, the convenience store, if you want to call it that, is smaller than the one you have on Rochester Road?
By about 300 square feet.
Okay, all right,
And the one that's on Rochester Road, that couldn't fit under a canopy.
okay.
So this was kind of middle ground. There's 4 of these across the enterprise out of 954 sites. So this is a new size for them. So you'll have all 3.
All right, thank you. Any more questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this is a public hearing tonight, so I will open the public hearing and ask if anyone from the public would like to address the commission on this. Come on up.
Hi, good evening. I'm Lyle Detterman. I own the property immediately to the south and to the north across the Larchwood. And I had a couple of questions about the parcel on the west edge of the property at the south side. Is that going to be landlocked?
We will ask the question for the staff when you get done, so we can't answer your question right now. So
Okay. That was one question. The other points I had is I was told when I built our facility there in 1990 that we weren't, the traffic all for trucks, et cetera, was restricted for our shop. And the only way we got an entrance off of John R. was due to the fact that Bostic's had a disagreement with the city, and it was settled in their favor. So they were asking for a drive off of John R. at the same time. So when I built my shop, they would give us a drive because they'd offered that to Bostic at the time. But Mr. Bostic didn't develop the property at that time. That was one thing. Another point I had is a question, what is the barrier between, say, our property and this gentleman's property here? Is there a cement wall? What is it? I don't know. Another thing is retention pond is really not a necessity if the parking lot is shaped per city requirements. It can be retained without having a retention pond and a swale and essentially a bunch of mosquitoes, et cetera, because we have people that are working in our facility obviously all the time. So I'd like to see how that is addressed. And if there's the security aspect of the night hours, et cetera, with our vehicles being there.
okay, great. We'll ask the staff the questions when you're done here. So
Okay.
any other questions?
At this point, that's my questions I have.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to address the commission? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and throw it back into the hands of our outstanding city staff and the planning consultant to answer those questions.
I can start addressing a few of them. Security, the site presently is vacant. There's no one on the site, so this will be, there'll be employees and customers between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. So there'll be more eyes on the abutting properties and more eyes making sure there's no shenanigans on the site. And there's security cameras, so if there are shenanigans, it'll be captured on camera. So I would argue that it's, from a safety and security standpoint, it would seem that it would be an improvement over what's there today.
Retention pond question?
Detention, this is what the applicant has submitted. It's a, Mr. Pisco is a civil engineer, I'm not, but it's a detention basin, so it would temporarily hold water in rain events, and then that water would eventually go away. So I'm not an expert on mosquitoes, but it's not standing water where the water is going to be there long enough for mosquitoes to, do what they do and have the larvae and all that. So so I don't believe it's going to create any mosquitoes. If I'm wrong, Mr. Pisco can come up and correct me. Did you want to talk about landscaping?
Sure. There's no landscaping requirement between the property to the south and this property. There's a small green belt of 10 feet, but there's no proposed fence or wall or any dense landscaping buffer between the two properties. That's a point of discussion you can have with the Planning Commission about whether or not there should be one, but by ordinance, there's not a landscaping buffer required. With regards to the issue of landlock, so it's kind of hard to see here, but this portion of the site is actually part of the parcel for the gas station. There is another parcel that's just south that abuts the property to the street to the south. That's owned under separate ownership. It's not part of this development. That parcel will remain as is, but this parcel will be part of the larger parcel that's developed as part of the gas station. So it won't be landlocked, it'll be combined as part of this development itself.
Okay, so that ditch that's there now, right at the property line, what will be the status of that? That's about 5 feet deep and 15 feet wide?
I'm not sure which ditch you're referring to. Where is it located?
It's right at the property line, where, at the south edge. Because when we developed our facility, we had to put in a pipe, underground pipe, manholes, et cetera, out per city requirements. And that left, there's still an open ditch there, in which, believe it or not, at the time when we demoed houses which were on that property, there were no septic tanks, and they opened directly into that ditch.
My suggestion would be that you talk to Mr. Pisco and let him know about your concerns because you're an adjoining property owner. And my guess is because he's representing Kroger, they want to maintain a good reputation, which they have. So I'm sure he would be willing to work with you to make sure your concerns are addressed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes, Mr. Carlisle.
Yeah, I mean, those are very good points raised. This has not gone through, it's in preliminary site plan, it's not gone through any sort of detailed engineering review. And so many of the details questions you're asking would be reviewed as part of the detailed engineering review. So any issues of the ditch or such will be addressed as part of the engineering review and confirmed by the city engineering department as well.
Great. All right. Yes, Mr. Savage.
Just to add, the requirement is that if and when this site gets developed, it can't negatively impact the abutting properties. So for drainage, so it can't suddenly start draining onto your property, and it can't negatively impact your property, and that's addressed through engineering. So if and when this is approved for preliminary site plan review, as Mr. Carla indicated, the next step would be submitting detailed engineering drawings. And again, the project engineer sitting in the audience, paying attention, probably taking notes, so that this can be addressed during engineering. So it's actually a good thing you're here, expressing your concerns. And in fact, it may be an opportunity to exchange information so that you can be, available for questions, or you can come to the engineering counter and you can review the engineering drawings. It's public information. You'll be able to look at those plans and see how it's being engineered. Okay?
All right. Yes, Ms. Parakis.
You know what, the gentleman did bring up a point about the landscaping, and I just went to our agenda pack, and I guess I didn't notice it before, but, well, why isn't there screening to the south? Is it because of the zoning that's not required?
Yeah, two basically industrial auto and a light industrial uses don't require a landscape screening buffer in between them by ordinance. However, as we know, this is a special use.
Right.
And if the Planning Commission thinks that the issue of screening is necessary, it is certainly a reasonable condition to require some form of screening along that property line, whether that be landscaping, a fence, or something of that nature. But by ordinance, just because of the two land uses are compatible by zoning ordinance, there's no landscaping requirement along that southern property line.
Okay, thank you.
Bring it back to the commission for postponement. I believe, based upon the information we have from Mr. Carlisle and city staff, that we technically cannot take action tonight because it has to come back for a public hearing on the vacation of the alley. But I guess at this point, then, any comments commissioners would have for the applicant to consider when it comes back. I know two concerns I know several of you have other concerns, but the two concerns I have is because it is close to a residential area compared to the other Kroger gas outlets, I am concerned about the lighting that Mr. Carlisle addressed. I think that has to be reduced to accommodate the fact that it is so close to residential. And the other concern I had was because we want to make it an amenity maybe for the neighbors, that maybe a little bit larger convenience store would be more appropriate. But any other comments from the commission? Yes, Mr. Buechner.
We were just talking about landscaping. I would think you'd be interested in putting landscaping to make your neighbors happy, but that's just a thought from me. We have a couple drawings in here that shows what it'll look like, but they're very, very basic. You mentioned earlier some stone and some other changes. To see that visual, I think, would help us a lot, too. My other question is 4 parking lots, Brent and Ben? Is 4 parking spaces enough? Does that meet code?
Yes, based on the size of the kiosk, 4 parking spaces is
And 2 of them
sufficient.
are for employees?
2 more for employees, 1 for handicap, and 1 for the general public.
That's enough?
It's enough by code.
Okay.
That being said, if the convenience store enlarges, they would have to put more parking in.
I guess the other question for the commission is how much you believe that requiring some kind of an EV charging station on the site, or at least the conduit for a future EV charging station, would be necessary for you to consider supporting this. So that might be something that would be a comment to take back for Mr. Pisco. Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I have one question, and then I'll first talk about what you just said. I guess I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, but I totally understand the applicant's logic in that if they're keeping if the convenience store part is going to be very small, it doesn't make sense to put the EV. So I guess as a commission, if we're trying to provide feedback, we kind of, I don't know that we can reach a consensus, but I'm sure he's looking for some sort of, thoughts about what we think, and I'm still undecided at this point. But I did have a question, because we talked a few times about that deceleration lane, but it was never, I didn't see it in the agenda packet. Is it required? It wasn't in the drawings. Because some people complained about the traffic, so it's important, I think, to know if there's going to be a deceleration lane.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not shown on here. It is shown on the site plan. There's a deceleration that runs the entire length of Larchwood all the way south, all the way to this gentleman's drive aisle just to the south.
North of Larchwood, heading south.
Yep.
And then people, of course, can turn left into, from heading north on John R., they can turn left in, I don't remember now, there might be a center lane, but there is a center lane. Okay.
Yeah, so the deceleration lane to accommodate this gentleman's driveway would extend further north past Larchwood.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone want to float a resolution that's the suggested language we have here from city staff? Yes.
Just before we do that, just to be transparent, we've communicated with Mr. Pisco. He's got a copy of the application for the street vacation. We will schedule a public hearing as quickly as we can to keep this item moving forward.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion for resolution for postponement. Yes.
I'll move.
Go
So
ahead.
do we want some of the items that you mentioned in the resolution, the lighting, the consideration of the larger C-store, or just more open, amend the application based on Plan Commission comments?
Let me ask staff, how detailed should we be in this resolution for postponement?
I'll answer in a non-legal term. I'll answer in a practical term. You're not approving it. This is not a resolution for approval. It's a resolution of postponement. However, I think it's fair to the applicant to give clear direction. For example, if a larger C-store is the consensus of the group that should be provided, I think that's important to note now. If that's not as important, you wouldn't want to give that direction tonight to the applicant. Same example, if the lighting is extremely important, reduce the lighting, I think that's something that the applicant should be aware of, as well as landscaping, screening along the south property line, and whether or not you want EV stations or not. Giving direction to the applicant doesn't lock you into this debate and discussion when it comes back, but it does allow a fair opportunity for the applicant to address your concerns before they come back before you.
Mr. Kraft.
Yeah. First of all, the size of the convenience store, I think they know their market. I think Kroger's pretty smart. They're people to know what size works for the area they're putting this in. So I wouldn't be jumping into their marketing people and understanding their sales amounts and things like that. I think best left to Kroger. So the size of the convenience store, I think, is whatever they suggest. As far as the lighting, they're suggesting, was it 50-foot candles at the?
3.9.
54.
How many?
54, I think
54,
it was.
okay. So from my back learning about lighting, back education, 100-foot candles is for like detailed things like reading. As people get older, and there's population of Troy is getting older, it's better to have more lighting to read things. I want to see my receipt and read it. Again, if it ends at 10 o'clock, okay. To me, that doesn't interfere with most people's sleep cycles, and if it did, they can draw the drapes, blinds or whatever. So everything about this presentation, there's nothing, let's put it this way, there's nothing I have an objection to in this particular presentation. We can suggest things if they think it makes sense for that location, they could, but I don't see anything that's objectionable to me.
Mr. Tagle wants to make some input too, so go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I don't agree with reciting the recommendations that the petitioner has heard. We're voting on whether we're postponing, and if I voted yes to agree to postpone it, that doesn't mean I'm voting yes and agree with everything that's being suggested. So I don't want to confuse the issue by saying that a yes vote means I'm supporting everything that's been discussed up here. So I'm concerned if we start adding on information that the petitioner has already heard onto the resolution, that I don't think that's a clean way to go at this.
Mr. Faison, does that give you a kind of an idea of how you want to frame your motion?
You want to say? Well, my idea is to frame it generally, and not
I think that's
specifically.
what the input you're getting is, so.
Just a quick clarification, if I may. So if we are asking for a suggestion, if they're going to increase the size of the convenience store, can we also then say, if that were to happen, then we can also consider having some EV charging spots on the property? Is that something that we are talking about here?
Well, it sounds like Mr. Faison, based upon the input he got from his colleagues or our colleagues, is he was going to be a more general resolution without specifying the size of the convenience store or the EV capability on the site, so.
Right, not telling the applicant exactly what to come back with.
Got it.
To imply
So,
what it approved.
Mr. Faison, that's your motion then, the way it's written here on the packet?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to Mr. Faison's motion? Mr. Fox, any discussion on the motion? And just to clarify, I don't know, Mr. Savidan, do you need clarification or not?
No, it's just a thought, I think, related to the motion. Would it help the Planning Commission at all if they had information on how many vehicle charging stations were available presently at the John R. and Big Beaver Kroger station? Because maybe I'm going to make up a number, there's already 20 spaces there. Or there's 0 spaces there, but they'd be willing to add half a dozen spaces. I'm just making up numbers, but I mean, I think that information would help the discussion, or I see John shaking his head.
John saying.
Well, again, today with the technology, 18 minutes, I'm going to go there to fuel my car and maybe go in and get a soda. I'm not going to go in there and park for 18 minutes. And again, I know technology is going to improve over time. But again, it's one of these things that I don't know that we should be forcing, especially the rationale for how how Kroger is approaching it, how Meijer approaches it, how all of these, when you're in the store for some period of time, it makes sense. And they take up very little spots in the parking lot. I mean, you could get 4 spots around a charging station, so I mean, I just think their approach, as other retailers' approach, is it's more appropriate to do it in a location where you're going to be in a place for some period of time. And to, again, I wouldn't want to make this a condition of approval for myself.
I second that.
All right.
My clarification is clear now.
We have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded, and we're open for any discussion on the motion. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I didn't have anything on the motion.
Okay,
so.
all right. So as I read it here, the motion is to resolve that, and this is Mr. Faison's motion, that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed Kroger D 463 fuel station, west side of John R., south of Larchwood. I won't repeat all the numbers because it's in the agenda. Be postponed for the following reasons. Number one, to allow the applicant the opportunity to amend the application if necessary based on Planning Commission discussion. And number two, allow the applicant the opportunity to submit an alley vacation application and the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing. Is that your motion?
Yes.
It's been seconded. Who was the seconder on the motion? Mr. Fox, okay. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we are ready for the vote then.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes?
Ms. Parakis? Yes. Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. All right. And we will see you back then whenever the, Mr. Savin and you can get together. And thank you for sharing your business card with your neighbor. So I'm sure he'll talk to you. All right. Next is public comment for items on the agenda. Anyone wishes to speak to the commission for items on the agenda? Seeing no one approaching the lectern, and we are on to Planning Commission comment. And we'll start maybe with Mr. Carlisle tonight and work our way down. Nothing?
Nothing.
Thank you for coming out this evening. Your
Yes.
comments are very helpful. Thank you for sharing your information. Just a real quick, there was, I think, 5 members of the Planning Commission attended the State of the City address last Wednesday, and what a production. Just top shelf, the setting, in the rotunda, the staircase and the butterflies and the orchestra, and Cindy Stewart did a great job. Nate Forbes was there. He was fantastic. It was just great.
Thank you. Mr. Frayne?
Nothing for me, thank you.
I'm set, thank you.
2 quick things. Reiterate what Director Sabadan said. It was a phenomenal event. The only thing I thought was missing, when the President of the United States comes up, they have a special anthem for him. We didn't have one for the mayor. I think that that was the only thing missing. But other than that, the other thing I have is this month on May 24th is the map, come on, Tom.
Michigan Association of Planning?
Yeah, Michigan Association of Planning they're calling it the Planners Night Out. It's going to be at the Woodbridge Pub in Detroit. So if you want to gather with fellow planners from across Michigan, you're welcome to attend. You probably got an email on it.
Thank you, Mr. Krant.
Sure.
Ms. Parakis?
I'm all set, thanks.
Mr. Faison?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Hudson?
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Nothing, thanks.
Mr. Biegner? Mr. Fox?
Just a ZBA update. We had 2 cases on the most recent agenda. The first one was addressing setback requirements it was a setback requirement bordering a city property, so it was a bit of a unique situation. The other one ended up getting postponed because there was a communication from the city attorney that the applicant had not received, so we ended up bumping it back. So nothing big from the ZBA.
Thank you. Ms. Sarnecki?
I have nothing, thank you, Mr.
I
Chair.
just wanted to mention 2 things. One, thank Mr. Fox, and I think Mr. Faison had sent information to Mr. Savin, who shared it with us on parking, and so obviously, I'm sure we'll be addressing the parking issues here in Troy in the near future, probably once we have the master plan out of the way, so.
Yeah, I can really quick, we're past 8, I don't want to add to the meeting. We're going to work with OHM and Carlisle Wortman. They're going to do kind of an audit of our parking requirements and our parking flexibility and whatnot. The challenge we have is there's an updated parking generation manual that's coming out from ITE, but it doesn't come out till September. So we didn't want to do a bunch of work and then put it on hold and then wait till September. So we're going to be working on that late summer, early fall, looking at our parking requirements.
Thank you. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is happy Public Service Recognition Week. We thank our city staff for all their hard work for the commission, so enjoy your Public Service Recognition Week. And with that, we are adjourned.
I want to ask one
go ahead.
question.
We're not adjourned then.
To Brent on the parking. It seemed like some of the things I read, it talked about, the codified parking not being utilized, right? And they had an analysis of how much parking was actually used. Is that going to be part of the study that we do?
Yeah, we're gonna look at all the standards. We're gonna pay particular attention to mixed use and to residential, like apartments. We've all been in the meetings where the developers say, well, your parking requirements are this, but we can do it for what the number should be is 1.4 or 1.5. And we talked about, we've had a lot of applications that have been approved and are under construction. We don't have a lot of new developments that are isolated, so we can really study them and completed. Ideally, we want new apartment units that are isolated, so you can't park somewhere else. You're parking on the site, so we can study those. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
You're going to do it as best you can.
We're going to do it to the best of our ability. And really quick, we don't have a lot of planning commissioners that say, hey, I found this article, can you forward this? So I just forward it. If we can start getting more of it, I'm happy to do it as long as it's relevant. Is it okay if I just kind of randomly send it like that? Would you rather we just include it in an agenda packet?
Oh, send it on.
Okay. If you start to get inundated, maybe we'll come up with a different plan, but okay, thank you.
We get an email from you every day, then maybe that.
Yeah.
is
Right,
too much,
okay.
so, okay.
Thank you.
With that,
I
then
just
we.
have a question.
Do you have another question? Go ahead.
Did you get a chance to see the Wall Street Journal article on the
So you sent me the article, I couldn't open it, and I was gonna send it to everybody in the city to say, hey, does anyone have a subscription to Wall Street Journal that you can create a PDF? Does anyone here have a subscription to Wall Street Journal? Can you create a PDF and send me the PDF?
Okay, I'll try.
Yeah, do that. I wanted to send it out, but I couldn't open it.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you're a subscriber, you can't.
All right, with that, then we are adjourned.
Thanks.
We just announced.
Yeah, my sister-in-law says the Wall Street.
Billy, you didn't have to say it.
I guess I don't have a membership. If you don't have a membership, you can't open it.
Those are your words.
I'm sorry, I got very confused. I was not sure.